The HOA president's face turned purple when she saw my new farm fence blocking her precious golf cart path, but nothing compared to the color she turned when I played her extortion recording through the community's PA system. She'd been squeezing residents for illegal fees for 3 years, threatening foreclosures and ruining lives, all while skimming HOA funds for her Botox appointments. Now she was on my property screaming about calling 911, waving her phone like a weapon, completely unaware that the quiet farmer she'd been harassing was actually the regional FBI chief on extended leave. In exactly 7 minutes, her entire criminal empire would come crashing down. And the best part was she live-streamed her own confession to 2,000 viewers. My name is Mason Hartwell, and until 6 months ago, I lived for the adrenaline rush of leading FBI raids on organized crime syndicates, 22 years of service, countless commendations, and a reputation for taking down corruption wherever it festered. But when my doctor used words like burnout and mandatory stress leave, I found myself trading my badge for a pitchfork on a small farm in Willowbrook Estates, a supposedly peaceful gated community 40 miles outside Atlanta. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd chosen this place specifically because the HOA rules promised tranquility and order. After years of chaos and danger, I craved nothing more than to wake up to roosters crowing and spend my days tending vegetables. The 10-acre property I'd purchased sat at the edge of the development, grandfathered in before Willowbrook expanded its boundaries in the late 90s. Perfect for a man who wanted to disappear into the simple life while his mind and body recovered from decades of high-stakes law enforcement. Patricia Stonefield had other plans. The HOA president stood 5'0" in her designer heels, but she carried herself like a general surveying conquered territory. I first encountered her on my 3rd day at the farm when she marched up my gravel driveway in a hot pink golf cart. Her bleached blonde hair shellacked into a helmet that defied both wind and logic. Behind her rode 2 women I'd later learn were her enforcement committee, Eleanor Vance and Dorothy Chen, both clutching clipboards like weapons. "You must be the new owner," Patricia announced, not bothering with pleasantries as she surveyed my property with obvious disdain. Her voice carried that particular tone of forced sweetness that made my investigator instincts prickle. "I'm Patricia Stonefield, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your violations." I set down the bag of chicken feed I'd been carrying, wiping my hands on my jeans. After years of wearing suits and tactical gear, the simple pleasure of farm clothes still felt like freedom. "Mason Hartwell," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What violations? I just moved in 3 days ago." Patricia's smile could have curdled milk. She snapped her fingers, and Eleanor thrust a clipboard forward with the efficiency of a practiced lackey. "Let's see. Unauthorized livestock. Those chickens are clearly audible from the main road. Non-conforming structures. That barn violates our architectural guidelines. Improper fencing. Split rail is not approved. Commercial farming in a residential zone. And," she paused for dramatic effect, "failure to submit landscaping plans for HOA approval." I couldn't help but laugh, which clearly wasn't the response she expected. "Mrs. Stonefield, this property is agricultural zoned and was farming land before Willowbrook existed. I have grandfather rights that predate your HOA by 40 years. Your rules don't apply here." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees despite the Georgia sun. Patricia's eyes narrowed to slits, and I recognized the look. I'd seen it on the faces of crime bosses when someone dared challenge their authority. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, each word dripping with venom, "everyone in Willowbrook follows the rules. Everyone. I suggest you read Article 15, Section C of our covenants. Agricultural grandfather rights can be revoked if the property is deemed a nuisance or safety hazard to the community." She turned on her designer heel, marching back to her golf cart with her minions in tow. As they drove away, Dorothy glanced back with something that might have been sympathy or warning. I made a mental note to review not just the HOA documents, but to do what I did best, investigare Patricia Stonefield. That evening, I sat on my porch with my laptop and a cold beer, diving into the digital footprints of Willowbrook's iron-fisted leader. 20 years of FBI work had taught me that everyone left traces And Patricia Stonefield was no exception. What I found made my investigator instincts sing like a struck tuning fork. Patricia had been HOA president for 8 years, winning elections that grew less competitive each term until the last 2 ran unopposed. Interesting. A deep dive into county records showed a pattern of liens and foreclosures in Willowbrook, always preceded by escalating HOA fines. More interesting. But the real red flag was the HOA's financials. The annual budget had ballooned from $300,000 to $2 million. While visible improvements to the community remained minimal, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Hartwell, be careful. She destroyed the last person who challenged her. A friend. No name? No identifier. But I saved the number. In my experience, anonymous tips often came from those too frightened to speak openly but desperate for justice. The next morning brought Patricia's first real salvo. I woke at 5 a.m. as usual, ready to feed the chickens and check on my tomato seedlings, only to find a bright orange notice plastered across my front door. Violation. Excessive noise before sept a.m. Fine. $500. Payment due within 48 hours or legal action will commence. I crumpled the notice. Checking my security cameras, the footage showed Patricia personally posting it at 4:47 a.m., which meant she'd violated her own noise ordinance by entering my property before 7. I saved the footage to multiple drives. Old habits die hard, and my FBI training had taught me to document everything. Over the next 2 weeks, the violations poured in like a bureaucratic tsunami. My American flag was improperly displayed because it was 6 inches too high. My truck was commercial vehicles prohibited, despite being a standard F-150. My vegetable garden was unapproved landscaping modification. Each violation carried fines ranging from $200 to $1,000. Then came the escalation I'd been expecting. I returned from the farmer's market to find my gate chain shut with a massive HOA lock. A laminated notice declared my property temporarily restricted pending compliance review. My chickens were squawking in distress. Having been without water all day in the 90-degree heat, I cut the lock with bolt cutters, my temper finally fraying. Patricia had crossed a line from petty harassment into criminal territory. Restricting access to my property and endangering my animals wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. But instead of calling the police like a civilian would, I decided to do what I did best: build a case. That evening, I installed hidden cameras covering every angle of my property's entrance. High definition, night vision, motion activated. The same specs we used for surveillance operations. If Patricia wanted to play games, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. The confrontation came 3 days later at the monthly HOA meeting I attended for the first time, curious to see Patricia in her natural habitat. The Willowbrook clubhouse was a monument to beige mediocrity. From the tan walls to the manila folders spread across folding tables, about 60 residents filled the uncomfortable chairs, most looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia held court from behind a podium that seemed compensating for her diminutive stature. She wore a coral suit that clashed with everything, including good taste, and her voice carried the practiced authority of a small-town dictator. The meeting began with typical HOA tedium, approving minutes, discussing pool maintenance, arguing about parking spaces. Then Patricia's eyes found me in the back row, and her smile turned predatory. Now, we need to address the ongoing situation with the Hartwell property. As you all know, maintaining standards is crucial for our property values. Mr. Hartwell has accumulated 17 violations totaling $8,500 in fines. Additionally, his agricultural operations pose health and safety risks to our community. I stood slowly, my 6'3" frame drawing attention as I'd intended. Point of order. Madam President, I'd like to see documentation of these health and safety risks you're claiming. Patricia's jaw tightened. Sit down. Mr. Hartwell, you're not recognized to speak. Actually, I continued, pulling out my phone, according to Robert's Rules of Order, which your bylaws state govern these meetings. Any member can request documentation of claims made during official proceedings, so I'll ask again. What documented health and safety risks? The room stirred with interest. Apparently, no one had challenged Patricia so directly before. Eleanor frantically flipped through papers while Dorothy seemed to shrink into her chair. Your chickens? Patricia sputtered. Could carry diseases? Your fence blocks emergency vehicle access. Your farming creates noise and odors that disturb neighboring properties. I smiled. The same smile I used during interrogations when suspects started lying. Interesting. My chickens are registered with the County Agricultural Department and receive regular veterinary inspections. Here's the latest report. I held up the document. My fence has a 16-foot emergency access gate, up to fire code. And as for noise and odors, I have decibel readings showing my property is quieter than the golf course maintenance at 6 a.m. and soil samples proving my organic farming produces fewer odors than the chemical fertilizers used on the HOA common areas. The room buzzed with whispers. Someone in the middle row actually applauded before catching themselves. Patricia's face had progressed from pink to red to an alarming purple shade. Furthermore, I continued, enjoying myself now. I've documented multiple instances of HOA board members trespassing on my property outside of legal hours, including security footage of you, Mrs. Stonefield, attempting to photograph inside my barn at 4:47 a.m. on Tuesday the 15th. That's criminal trespass, which carries up to a year in jail in Georgia. How dare you threaten me, Patricia shrieked, abandoning any pretense of professionalism. I am the president of this association. I have authority to inspect any property for violations. No, I said calmly. You don't. HOA authority ends at property lines without a court order or explicit permission, which you don't have and won't get. I turned to address the room. How many of you have been fined for violations that seemed arbitrary? How many have had your property accessed without permission? How many have wondered where your rising HOA fees actually go? The whispers grew louder. A man in the front row raised his hand tentatively. I was fined $500 because my grass was reportedly an inch too tall. Patricia measured it herself at dawn. A woman across the aisle stood up. She had my car towed from my own driveway because it had a small oil stain. Cost me $600 to get it back. Patricia banged her gavel so hard it cracked. Order. This meeting is adjourned. But the dam had broken. Residents began sharing stories, comparing fines, questioning expenses. I quietly made my way out, satisfied with planting seeds of dissent. In my experience, corrupt leadership crumbled fastest when their victims found collective courage. That night, Patricia made her biggest mistake. My security system alerted me to movement at 2 a.m. The night vision cameras showed Patricia and two men I didn't recognize at my gate. They weren't just trespassing this time. They were attaching something to my fence posts. I grabbed my phone and a flashlight, documenting everything as I approached. Step away from the fence. I called out, my FBI command voice cutting through the darkness. The two men jumped, but Patricia stood her ground, chin raised defiantly. This is O property, she declared. We're installing monitors to track your violations electronically. I kept my phone recording, making sure to capture clear audio. Patricia, you're on my property without permission at 2 a.m. with two individuals I don't recognize, installing surveillance equipment on my fence. That's criminal trespass, stalking, and illegal surveillance. You have 10 seconds to leave before I call the real police. Not your cousin who works dispatch. One of the men tugged at Patricia's arm. Lady, you said this was legal. I'm not going to jail for a surveillance job. Patricia yanked free. Shut up, I'm paying you enough to... She caught herself. But too late. The admission of payment for illegal surveillance was now recorded. The men backed away, clearly recognizing they'd been dragged into something criminal. 5 seconds, I said. They ran. Patricia tried to maintain dignity in her retreat, but it's hard to look imperious while scurrying away in the dark. I carefully removed their equipment, bagging it as evidence. The serial numbers would be traceable, and any good prosecutor could build a stalking case from this. The next morning, I decided to send my own message. I'd purchased the materials weeks ago, planning a simple farm improvement. Now it would serve a dual purpose. By noon, I had erected a 6-foot agricultural fence along the property line that bordered the HOA's golf cart path. Completely legal, properly permitted, and coincidentally, blocking the shortcut Patricia used daily to harass residents on my side of the development. The shrieking started at 2:17 p.m. I was spreading mulch in my garden when Patricia's golf cart came careening up my driveway. Leaving grooves in the gravel, she leaped out before it fully stopped. Her face contorted with rage. "You take that fence down right now," she screamed. Spittle flying. "That's blocking official HOA access." I leaned on my rake. The picture of rural calm. "It's my property, Patricia. I can fence it however I like. The main road is still perfectly accessible. You'll just have to drive an extra mile like everyone else. I'll have it torn down. I'll get an injunction. You'll what?" I interrupted. "Add more illegal fines, trespass again, install more surveillance equipment?" I pulled out my phone. "By the way, I've been meaning to ask, does the HOA board know you've been billing them for security services provided by your nephew's company, the same nephew caught on my cameras last night? That's embezzlement and conspiracy." Patricia went very still. The kind of stillness that comes when someone realizes they've walked into a trap. Behind her, I noticed Eleanor pulling up in her sedan, followed by 2 more cars. Word traveled fast in Willowbrook. "You can't prove anything," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Can I?" I smiled. 22 years with the FBI taught me a thing or two about evidence collection, financial records, security footage, witness testimonies. Did you know threatening residents with false foreclosure to extract payments is considered extortion under federal law? Eleanor had gotten out of her car and was approaching slowly. Dorothy beside her. Other residents were gathering, drawn by the drama. Someone was definitely recording on their phone. Patricia spun around, seeing her audience. "Get back to your homes. This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Eleanor said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at the usually submissive board member. "I'm tired of this, Patricia. Tired of watching you bully people, steal money, destroy lives. Mr. Hartwell is right. We've all been too scared to stand up to you. But he's showing us we don't have to be afraid anymore." "You pathetic little," Patricia started toward Eleanor. Fists clenched. I stepped between them. "Patricia, I suggest you leave my property. Now, and if you're smart, you'll start thinking about a good lawyer. The FBI takes a dim view of extortion, embezzlement, and racketeering. Yes, even HOA presidents can be charged under RICO statutes when they run their associations like criminal enterprises." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. The gathered crowd had grown to over 20 residents, all watching their tyrant queen face someone she couldn't intimidate or destroy. "This isn't over," she hissed, backing toward her golf cart. "I'll ruin you. I'll take your farm. You'll do nothing," I said firmly, "because in about 10 minutes, you're going to receive a call from the Attorney General's office about the formal complaint I filed this morning, complete with evidence of embezzlement, extortion, and civil rights violations. Did you know that using HOA power to selectively enforce rules based on personal vendettas can be prosecuted as discrimination?" Patricia's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. The Attorney General's office had a very distinctive caller ID. She answered with a shaking hand. Her side of the conversation consisting mainly of, "Yes, sir," and "I understand," and "Monday morning." When she hung up, she looked broken. The crowd of residents watched in stunned silence as their invincible president deflated like a punctured balloon. "You did this?" she whispered, staring at me with genuine bewilderment. "Why, you could have just paid the fines. Moved away. Why fight so hard?" I thought about all the cases I'd worked. All the bullies with badges or titles who thought power meant permission to abuse others because someone has to, because good people shouldn't have to live in fear of petty tyrants. Because I've spent my career taking down people who hurt others for profit and pleasure, and just because I'm on leave doesn't mean I've forgotten how. Eleanor stepped forward, pulling out her phone. "I'm live streaming this to the Willowbrook Facebook page. Everyone should see what's happening." She turned the camera toward Patricia. Patricia Stonefield has been stealing from us, threatening us, making our lives miserable for years. But she picked the wrong person to bully this time. Patricia tried to lunge for Eleanor's phone, but Dorothy grabbed her arm. Stop, Patricia. It's over. We have the board votes to remove you. And after what Mr. Hartwell just revealed, you'll be lucky if you don't end up in federal prison. The sound that emerged from Patricia's throat was inhuman, a shriek of pure rage that sent birds flying from nearby trees. She wrenched free and stumbled back to her golf cart, gunning it in reverse so fast she clipped my new fence post. The small crowd scattered as she tore off down the driveway, her exit marred by the wobbling of a flat tire she'd gotten from her reckless driving. I turned to the assembled residents, recognizing faces I'd seen around the community. Some looked shell-shocked, others relieved. A few actually had tears in their eyes. For what it's worth, I said, I'm sorry it had to happen this way, but Patricia's reign of terror ends now. If any of you have been victimized, document everything. The AG's office will want to hear from you. An older man in the back called out, Are you really FBI? I nodded. On medical leave. But yes, regional chief of the white-collar crime division. Funny how the universe works. I came here for peace and quiet, and ended up finding exactly the kind of corruption I spent my career fighting. Eleanor lowered her phone. The live stream's still running. We need an emergency board meeting. Tonight, I motioned to remove Patricia as president and freeze all HOA accounts pending an audit. Seconded, called three voices simultaneously. As the impromptu gathering broke up, residents approaching me with thanks and stories of their own harassment. My phone buzzed with an alert from my security system. The cameras had detected motion at my back gate, the one that bordered the wilderness area behind my property. I excused myself and pulled up the feed on my phone. What I saw made my blood run cold. Patricia's golf cart was parked at the gate, and she was pouring something from a large container around the wooden posts. Even in black and white night vision, I recognized the setup. Gasoline. I dialed 911. My FBI instincts kicking in. This is Mason Hartwell at 4782 Old Farm Road. Patricia Stonefield is attempting to commit arson on my property. She's pouring accelerant around my back gate. I need units here immediately. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Sir, can you see her now? Is there active fire? On the screen, Patricia pulled out what looked like a lighter. She's about to ignite it. I'm federal law enforcement on leave. Badge number. The screen flared white as Patricia lit the gasoline. But instead of the inferno she'd planned, the flames sputtered and died almost immediately. In my rush to document her crimes, I'd forgotten to mention that I'd treated all my fence posts with fire retardant specifically designed for agricultural use. California wildfire prevention had taught me well. Patricia shrieked in frustration, dousing more gasoline. Trying again. The sirens in the distance grew louder. On my phone screen, I watched her realize her mistake. She tried to run, but her designer heels caught in the soft earth, sending her sprawling face first into the mud. I reached my back gate just as the first police car slid to a stop, lights painting the trees, red and blue. Two officers emerged, hands on their weapons, taking in the scene. Patricia Stonefield covered in mud and gasoline, empty containers scattered around, char marks on my fence posts, and me standing calmly with my phone recording everything. Ma'am, stay on the ground, the lead officer commanded. Hands where we can see them. Patricia raised her head, mud dripping from her perfect hair. Arrest him, she screeched. He assaulted me. He pushed me. Ma'am, the officer interrupted. You're covered in gasoline next to evidence of attempted arson. You have the right to remain silent. As they cuffed Patricia and loaded her into the patrol car, her final words were a threat that might have scared a civilian. My lawyers will destroy you. I'll take everything you own. You don't know who you're messing with. The officer looked at me with raised eyebrows. I showed him my FBI credentials. She's partially right. She doesn't know who she's been messing with. I'll need copies of all reports for the federal case. This is the culmination of an ongoing pattern of criminal behavior, including extortion, embezzlement, and now attempted arson with terroristic threats. The officer whistled low. Fed. Huh? That explains why you were so calm. Most people would be freaking out if someone tried to burn their property. I shrugged. After 22 years of taking down organized crime, a corrupt HOA president doesn't really get the adrenaline pumping. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect her to escalate to arson. That's desperation move. My phone rang. Eleanor's name on the screen. Mason, you need to see this. Patricia's been live streaming on the HOA Facebook page. She thinks she's documenting your crimes. But she's actually been broadcasting her confession to 2,000 viewers. I pulled up the page on my phone. There was Patricia, pre-arrest, ranting into her phone camera about how she was protecting the community from the federal agent infiltrator, and how she'd done what was necessary to maintain order, even if it meant bending some rules. The comments section was exploding, with residents sharing screenshots of illegal fines, documented harassment, and suspicious financial transactions. Eleanor, I said, download that video before her lawyer tells her to delete it. That's admissible evidence of intent and confession. Already done. Dorothy's downloading it too. And about 50 residents have shared it. She can't delete it now. Oh. And Mason, thank you. You did in 3 weeks what we couldn't do in 8 years. You gave us our community back. As I hung up, more police cars arrived, followed by a fire truck and an FBI sedan. I recognized Agent Sarah Chen from the Atlanta office. Word traveled fast in law enforcement circles. Hartwell, she said, approaching with a grin. Couldn't even make it 6 months without finding a case. Could you? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. What can I say? Corruption finds me. Though I was hoping for tomatoes and chickens, not HOA tyrants and attempted arson. Sarah surveyed the scene, taking in the evidence markers, the charred fence posts, and Patricia's golf cart abandoned in the mud. Well, you've handed us a gift-wrapped RICO case. Financial crimes. Extortion. Attempted arson. Conspiracy. The U.S. attorney is going to love this. Small-time corruption. Big-time federal charges. As we talked, my phone buzzed with messages. Residents offering support, sharing evidence, thanking me for standing up to Patricia. One caught my eye. From the anonymous number that had warned me weeks ago. Thank you. She destroyed my family's business with false violations. We lost everything. Seeing her in handcuffs gives me hope that justice exists. I looked around my farm, this piece of paradise I'd found while seeking peace. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My chickens were settling in for the night, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. Tomorrow, I'd go back to feeding them, tending my garden, building the simple life I'd dreamed of. But tonight, I had calls to make, statements to give, and a community to help heal from years of tyranny. Patricia Stonefield thought she could rule through fear and intimidation, never imagining that a burned-out FBI agent seeking solitude would be her downfall. As the last police car pulled away with Patricia in the back, still shrieking about lawsuits and revenge, I noticed something wonderful. The sound of laughter. Neighbors had gathered along the road, sharing stories, making plans for a better HOA, celebrating the end of an era. Dorothy approached with a plate of cookies and a sheepish smile. I baked these as an apology. For all the times I stood by while Patricia hurt people, I should have been braver. I accepted the plate gratefully. Courage is contagious. Dorothy, sometimes it just takes one person standing up to remind others they can too. Eleanor joined us, still clutching her phone. The live stream has over 50,000 views now. News stations are calling, Patricia made Willowbrook famous. Just not the way she intended. In the distance, a siren wailed one last time, carrying Patricia Stonefield toward a future of federal charges, cour date, and the justice she'd denied so many others. But here on my farm, surrounded by neighbors who were rediscovering what community actually meant, there was only peace. The very thing I'd come looking for in the first place. The war with the HOA president was over, but I had a feeling the story was just beginning, because in my experience, corruption rarely existed in isolation. Patricia ada cómplices, enablers, and probably a few secrets that would shake Willowbrook to its foundation. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I had cookies to eat, neighbors to meet properly, and chickens to check on one last time before bed. The simple life I'd wanted, earned through the complicated skills I'd hoped to leave behind. As I headed back to my house, my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. FBI headquarters. Washington, D.C. The caller ID showed the director's office. Hartwell, I answered, already knowing what was coming. Mason. The director's familiar voice carried a mix of amusement and exasperation. I see you've been keeping busy on your medical leave. Arson. Extortion. RICO charges against an HOA president? Really? She started it, I said, which earned me a laugh. I'm sure she did. Listen, when you're ready to come back, we've got a new task force on small-town corruption. Sam's fitting, don't you think? I looked at my farm, my piece of hard-won peace, and thought about all the Patricia Stonefields out there, terrorizing communities, destroying lives, believing their petty power made them untouchable. 6 months, I said. Let me finish my leave. Get me tomatoes harvested. Then we'll talk. Fair enough. Oh, and Mason, good work. Even on leave. You're one hell of an agent. As I hung up, a text arrived from an unknown number. Mr. Hartwell, I'm an HOA president in Texas. I've been following your story. There's something happening here that I think the FBI should know about. Can we talk? I saved the number for later. Tonight was for celebration. Tomorrow, there would be new battles to fight, new corruption to expose. But that was the thing about justice. It never really slept. Even when its servants tried to take a break, the sound of sirens faded completely, replaced by crickets and the distant laughter of free neighbors. Patricia's reign was over. But my story in Willowbrook was just beginning, because sometimes, the best way to find peace is to fight for it. One corrupt HOA president at a time. The next morning brought chaos disguised as sunshine. I woke at 4:30 a.m. to find news vans lining the road outside my farm, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical sunflowers. Patricia's live-streamed confession had gone viral overnight, turning Willowbrook Estates into ground zero for what the media was calling HOA Gate. I fed my chickens while dodging reporters, grateful for the new fence that kept them at bay. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Messages from residents, media requests, and 3 voicemails from Patricia's lawyer threatening lawsuits that would never materialize. The final message was from Agent Chen. Federal warrant served on HOA offices at 6AWW.M. You might want to be there. I arrived at the Willowbrook clubhouse to find it transformed into a crime scene. FBI agents carried boxes of documents while forensic accountants set up laptops in the main meeting room. Chen met me at the door with coffee and a grin that promised interesting developments. Mason, you're going to love this, she said, leading me to a conference room where evidence covered every surface. Patricia Stonefield wasn't just running a corrupt HOA. She was running 4 of them, all with the same playbook: intimidation, false fines, embezzlement, and forced sales to her shell companies. I studied the documentation. My trained eye-catching patterns immediately. She'd buy the foreclosed properties through LLCs, then flip them for massive profits. Classic racketeering with a suburban twist. How much are we talking? Conservative estimate, $12 million over 8 years? She targeted elderly residents, minorities, anyone she thought couldn't fight back. Chen pulled up financial records on her laptop. But here's where it gets interesting. She wasn't working alone. The screen showed wire transfers between Patricia's accounts and a name that made my blood run cold: Judge Harold Morrison, the same judge who'd dismissed every complaint against Patricia over the years. The amounts were staggering. Clear bribes hidden as consulting fees for Morrison's wife's fake marketing company. We need those other HOA records, I said, my mind racing through connections. If she was running the same scam in multiple communities, there's a whole network involved. Lovers, city officials, probably a few dirty cops. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, looking simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. Mason, we found something in Patricia's office. You need to see. She held up a leather journal. She kept records of everyone she destroyed. Names, Dates. Amounts stolen. It's like she was proud of it. I flipped through the pages. Each entry, a family's tragedy reduced to Patricia's neat handwriting, the Johnsons, forced out after fabricated violations when they refused to sell. Maria Gonzalez, a widow who lost her home of 30 years because she couldn't pay a $1,000 fine for roses that were the wrong shade of pink. Dozens of stories, each worse than the last. This is evidence of systematic targeting, Chen said, photographing each page. She profiled victims based on vulnerability. Single mothers, elderly, immigrants, anyone isolated from support systems. This isn't just corruption. It's predatory. My phone rang. Unknown Texas number. I stepped outside to answer, finding a quiet spot away from the chaos. The voice on the other end was female. Nervous, but determined. Mr. Hartwell, I'm Rebecca Morrison, HOA president of Lakeside Estates in Austin. I saw what you did to Patricia Stonefield. She trained me, set up our whole system. I've been trying to get out for 2 years, but she has things on me. On all of us. There's a whole network, bigger than you know. I pulled out my notebook, slipping back into investigator mode. Tell me everything. Rebecca. Start from the beginning. Her story unfolded like a nightmare. Patricia ran training seminars for HOA presidents across the South, teaching them her methods of control and profit. She took a cut of every illegally collected fine, every forced sale, creating a pyramid scheme of suburban tyranny. Those who tried to quit faced blackmail, lawsuits, or worse. There's a meeting next week in Atlanta, Rebecca said, all her protégés, about 30 HOA presidents. They're planning damage control, destroying evidence. If you could get someone inside. I thanked Rebecca, promising protection if she'd testify, then called Chen immediately. A multi-state conspiracy required federal coordination, and we had less than a week to prepare. But first, I had a community to help heal. That afternoon, Willowbrook held its first free HOA meeting in 8 years. The clubhouse overflowed with residents who'd been too frightened to attend before. I sat in the back, watching democracy slowly reassert itself as neighbors nominated new board members and discussed reversing Patricia's draconian rules. Dorothy stood at the podium, her transformation from Patricia's minion to community advocate remarkable. I motioned that all fines issued in the last 5 years be reviewed by independent audit. Those found to be fraudulent will be refunded with interest. The vote was unanimous. Similar motions followed, each unwinding another thread of Patricia's web. When someone proposed a resolution thanking me, I slipped out quietly. Recognition wasn't why I'd fought. Justice was its own reward. Outside, I found an unexpected visitor by my truck, Harold Morrison, looking haggard in civilian clothes instead of his judge's robes. He glanced around nervously before approaching. Agent Hartwell, he began, voice shaking. I know you have evidence about the bribes. I want to make a deal. I'll testify about everything. The whole network. In exchange for consideration. I studied him, seeing a weak man who'd sold his oath for money but might still serve justice's purpose. That's not my call, Judge, but full cooperation is your only chance. Start with the Atlanta meeting. I need details. Morrison spilled everything. The meeting was Patricia's annual summit, where she collected her percentage and strategized expansion. This year's agenda included destroying evidence and targeting witnesses. He provided the location, attendee list, and Patricia's emergency protocols. She has encrypted files on everyone. Morrison added desperately, blackmail material, financial records, even a few murders made to look like accidents. She called it her insurance policy. If you can get those files. Chen arrived within minutes of my call, taking Morrison into federal custody. We had our insider and our roadmap. Now we needed a plan to take down 30 corrupt HOA presidents in one coordinated strike. I spent the next 3 days working with the task force, my medical leave officially suspended as I consulted on Operation Suburban Justice. We mapped the network, identified assets, and prepared warrants for 5 states. The Atlanta meeting would be our honeypot, drawing all the conspirators into one location, But Patricia wasn't done with me. The morning of the operation, I found a letter nailed to my chicken coop. Her handwriting, somehow smuggled from federal detention. You think you've won, but you've only scratched the surface. When my partners realize what you've done, that farm will burn for real. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. I photographed the threat, adding it to her growing list of charges. Then focused on feeding my chickens. They didn't care about human corruption. Only whether their breakfast arrived on time. Their simple needs grounded me before the storm ahead. The Atlanta meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Grandview Hotel's conference center. I positioned myself in the FBI command vehicle, watching feeds from undercover agents posing as hotel staff. One by one, HOA presidents arrived, each carrying the weight of their community's suffering. Rebecca Morrison wore a wire, her nervous energy visible even on camera. She'd agreed to get Patricia's associates to discuss their crimes on record. The final evidence needed for RICO charges against all of them. As she entered the conference room, 30 faces turned toward her, suspicious and scared. Patricia sends her regards. Rebecca began. Following our script, she wants us to stay calm, stay united. The FBI has nothing without her files. And those are secure. A heavy-set man I recognized as Thomas Brennan, president of 3 Miami HOAs, slammed his fist on the table. Secure? She live-streamed her confession. We're all exposed because of her ego, which is why we need to accelerate the evidence destruction. Another president added, I've already had residents asking questions, demanding audits. If they find what we've done, Rebecca pressed, her wire catching every word. You mean the systematic theft, the fraudulent liens, the targeting of vulnerable residents? Brennan stood, face reddening. Don't get righteous now. Rebecca, you've taken your cut just like the rest of us. That widow in your community, the one who conveniently died after refusing to sell, your hands aren't clean either. The room erupted in accusations and finger-pointing, each president trying to minimize their involvement while implicating others. Chen's voice crackled in my earpiece. This is gold. They're confessing to everything. At 2:47 p.m., we struck. FBI agents flooded the conference room while simultaneous raids hit HOA offices across 5 states. The president's shock turned to panic as they realized the scope of the operation. Some tried to run, others to destroy evidence on their phones. But it was too late. I entered as they were being cuffed, wanting them to see the face of the man who'd brought them down. Brennan recognized me first, his sneer revealing expensive dental work. The farmer. He spat. Patricia said you were just some burnout cop playing in dirt. She underestimated you. She underestimated everyone. I replied calmly. Every resident you terrorized, every family you destroyed, they're all getting justice today. Your reign of suburban terror is over. As agents led them away, Rebecca approached, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. I've wanted out for so long, but I was terrified. Patricia had photos. She threatened my daughter. You're safe now, I assured her. Your cooperation will help hundreds of families get their homes and money back. That took real courage. The operation's aftermath stretched for weeks. Over 200 HOA board members across the South were arrested or resigned. Millions in stolen funds were recovered and returned to victims. Patricia Stonefield faced federal sentences totaling 300 years, though she'd likely serve 20 with good behavior. But the real victory came in the communities themselves. Willowbrook elected a new board committed to transparency and fairness. The illegal fines were refunded, the restrictive covenants revised, and a new spirit of neighborly cooperation replaced years of fear. I finally got to harvest my tomatoes in peace. Their red ripeness, a metaphor for justice served. My farm became a gathering place for barbecues and potlucks. Neighbors sharing food and stories on the land Patricia had tried to destroy. Even my chickens seemed happier, their eggs production increasing as if they sensed the changed atmosphere. 6 months later, I stood in my garden reading a letter from FBI headquarters. The Suburban Corruption Task Force had expanded nationwide, uncovering similar schemes in 12 more states. They wanted me to lead it, to turn my accidental victory into systematic reform. I looked around my farm, at the community that had become family, at the simple life I'd fought to protect. The tomatoes were coming in again. The chickens needed feeding. And Dorothy's grandson was coming by to learn about composting. This was my piece. Hard-won and precious. But I thought about all the other communities still suffering under corrupt HOAs. All the families being destroyed by petty tyrants with clipboards and bad intentions. My phone buzzed with another message from a desperate homeowner, this time in Oregon, begging for help against an HOA president who sounded frighteningly familiar. That evening, I called the director. I'll consult. I said, train agents, review cases, help build strategies, but I'm keeping my farm. This is home now. Fair enough? He laughed. Though I suspect trouble will keep finding you anyway. It always does with the good ones. As sunset painted the sky purple and gold, I sat on my porch watching fireflies dance among the tomato plants. Patricia Stonefield was serving her first year in federal prison. Her network dismantled. Her victims compensated. Justice had prevailed through chicken feed and fence posts, through community courage and federal statutes. My phone rang. Eleanor's name appeared, probably calling about the next community garden meeting, but the voice that spoke wasn't hers. It was panicked. Young. Scared. Mr. Hartwell, this is Eleanor's granddaughter. Someone's been following her since she testified. A man in a black car. She said if anything happened, I should call you first. I was already grabbing my keys. My retirement from active duty apparently shorter than expected. Because corruption, I'd learned, was like weeds in a garden. You could pull them all, but seeds remained, waiting for negligence to let them flourish again. Lock your doors. I told her, I'm on my way, and call 911 the moment you hang up. As I raced toward Eleanor's house, I smiled grimly. Patricia might be in prison, but her legacy of fear wasn't quite dead. Someone thought they could intimidate witnesses, restore the old order through terror. They were about to learn what Patricia had discovered too late. When you threaten good people in my community, you don't just face a retired FBI agent. You face a farmer who's learned that sometimes the best fertilizer for justice is the complete destruction of corruption's roots. My chickens would have to wait for their evening feeding. I had one more weed to pull.